Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
Richard, before we get started, we want to talk about MedDevice Boston, an MD&M event this September 25th and 26th at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. There's going to be amazing opportunities here for peer-to-peer connections and knowledge sharing, because we know just how paramount these opportunities are for staying informed and compliant in the highly regulated and ever-evolving medical device industry. And that's why they're bringing you Quick Connect Lounge and opportunities for one-on-one curated matchmaking, bringing attendees and suppliers together for in-depth conversation where true collaboration can thrive. Get your free Expo Pass and 20% off the overall conference by using the code IMPACT. That's IMPACT at checkout. Click in the links below, and we'll see you there.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Sydney Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Vessl Prosthetics. Sydney, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Richard and Kyle, for having me.
This is exciting because we were just talking about before we got started here that, Sydney, you and I had connected nearly a couple of years ago now. And so it's really nice to come full circle and hear the latest on Vessl and all the things that have been happening, because we have been following your journey and we can see there's been a lot of activity. So there's going to be some great stories and insights to share with our listeners over the next half an hour or so. So before we get started into all that, we do like to set the stage for the audience. So please tell us, what is the big problem that Vessl Prosthetics is looking to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for having me. And it is very exciting to reconnect after a couple of years. The problem that we're solving is what people call poor socket fit. So this is a problem that affects folks with leg amputations or limb difference. And it's when their leg changes size inside of a prosthetic leg that does not change size. So imagine wearing a pair of shoes that's too big and your feet is slipping around inside of the shoes. It's that same problem, but it's far more debilitating and far more frustrating when it's your leg that is not fitting properly.
And I can imagine there's all sorts of challenges wearing a prosthetic. And so to have the added problem where you're struggling with the comfort and the fit, how many people will get affected by these sorts of situations?
Well, everyone is going to experience it at some point in their prosthetic journey. And it's especially at the beginning, people are losing a lot of volume from swelling going down after the surgery and the muscles atrophying if it's post and amputation surgery. And so definitely it's going to happen at that point where you'll have some fit changes. But then some people have it chronically throughout their life where their leg is changing, and weight loss, weight gain, exercise, diet, all of those kinds of factors, even the seasons can affect it.
So it sounds like there's a really inherent design fault with what the current standard of care is. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the current design and the issues with that?
Yeah, for sure. And it's from no fault of the clinicians, right? Like everybody's doing the best that they can with the technology that's available. The inherent problem is that a leg, an anatomical leg, changes size and prosthetic sockets don't. And so what they do right now is industry standard is a prosthetic socket. So think of it like a cup that holds on to the amputated part of the leg, and it's custom fabricated. So they'll cast it just like if you broke your leg, they'll make a cast and make a mold of the leg to make it custom patient to patient. But then that cup isn't able to adjust in size. So what you do is you take the leg off, the whole prosthetic leg, you take it off and you put a sock on. So again, back to that shoe analogy, it's like you're wearing shoes that are too big and you put 3 pairs of socks on to make your feet a little bit bigger.
And Sydney, it sounds like that could be an expensive shoe to replace too. So I'm sure, you want to hold on to that prosthetic leg as long as you can, right? And make it last as long as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it's a lot of even the expense for sure, both in cost and in time, right? It takes time for the prosthetist to get fit properly, but it also takes time then for the amputee or the person living with limb loss and limb difference to be going back and forth to the clinic. So yeah, the more we can allow for that adjustment, the better.
Cool. Well, I think that kind of dovetails nicely into our next question. How is Vessl looking to solve these problems today?
So what we wanted to design was something that was accessible to the masses while automatically adjusting the size and fit of the prosthesis. And so I'm going to hold up for the listeners. I'm going to hold up an example of our product, which feel free to check out the video later or go to our website. You can see it there as well. So the socket itself will have panels. These panels are custom. You can choose where the prosthetist, that is the clinician, chooses where, how many of these, and what the size and shape are. But they're all connected to our core technology, which we're calling isoform. And isoform uses each step someone with an amputation takes in order to automatically adjust the fit of those panels on the leg. So it's automatically tightening throughout the day as the leg shrinks.
Well, what happens if it expands?
Right now it's a manual expansion. So there's a release button right here on the side. You release the pressure and it allows those panels to expand. So the instances where you would need that would be if you're going to sit down and watch a movie, sit down for a meal, sit down at your desk at work. You can just release that pressure, or flying in an airplane. And then if you're moving throughout the day and that fluid is moving through the limb, it actually typically shrinks. So when you're out walking the dog or you're in the grocery store and you don't have time to stop and fix the fit of the socket, that's when it's automatically accommodating for you.
And how is the design of your technology and your product here, how is it different than, current other competing technologies, current technologies in the market?
For sure. So there are some manually adjustable sockets on the market. So these sockets rely on constant manual operation, which unfortunately makes it not as accessible to the vast majority of amputees that are part of the aging or diabetic populations, where they really struggle sometimes to make those adjustments themselves. And so what we wanted was something that could automatically adjust. So it doesn't have a battery or sensors or motors. It's purely passive. That's why it uses the step that an amputee is taking. And so it absorbs the shock in the bottom piece of the socket with each step they take in order to automatically tighten those panels.
Is it a similar process too, as if you were to, get another prosthetic leg, as that fitting process?
Exactly. Purely the same. So the patient will experience the same process as you're saying. You go to the clinic, you have the socket custom fit to your leg, and then all the prosthetist has to do, same process for them as well. All they have to do is add our technology, our isoform disc, to the bottom of the socket. And there's 4 standard holes. Think of it like Lego blocks. There's 4 standard holes and you can mix and match different pieces. And so they're able to still do that with isoform.
Awesome. And the manufacturing around this device, there seems to be maybe more parts, more components. I'm really not sure. I'm just, looking at the product you're holding up right now. But is there, really a difference in cost when it comes to a product like this, a device versus the competitive technology that's out there today?
It's a great question. So the device itself will be mass manufactured, which helps to keep costs down. It's really more custom size-wise, so small, medium, large, depending on the weight and size of the patient. The cost of the device to the patient will be more. You're adding an additional component, but it is covered through insurance. So that's another benefit both to the prosthetist and the amputee, is it will be covered through insurance.
Oh, that's fantastic. Richard, I look at this device and I know we were chatting earlier, but I think about also just not just the Olympics, right, that have been going on, but I think in general, folks that have, a prosthetic leg, they're still like super, they want to go live their lives, right? And they're super passionate about like not missing out. They want to be able to run, walk, explore, right? People still want to remain fit and healthy too, so, you think about, the challenges, I think, Richard, too, with some of the current products and technologies out there today, and how this could really serve such a huge purpose and help those folks. I think it sounds like, based on what Sydney was sharing and telling us, this is a massive improvement over the current technology today.
Oh yeah, 100%, Kyle. And so many different value propositions you're bringing there. Obviously, you've got the custom fit you've got that improved function, and then you're bringing in this cost-saving element. Before we delve into all that, I would love to know what is the background of this technology? What's gone into this to take it to where it is today?
Yeah, for sure. So my background is in engineering. I started in mechanical, but was never actually interested in car engines. So I decided to study the human body instead, which led me to biomechanics and biomedical engineering. And then I did a program in Canada modeled after Stanford's biodesign. So it brings engineers, PhD scientists, and doctors together to innovate in the medical space, all about entrepreneurship. That was where I met my co-founder and where we discovered the problem. So my co-founder has a PhD in clinical anatomy. We've got very complementary skill sets. And it was very easy to become passionate about the problem when we met people who were struggling with it. So that was the birthplace of the idea almost 3 years ago.
That's such a really solid foundation. And I think the Stanford Biodesign program is world renowned. And it's just such a great approach because you're going firsthand and you're really truly identifying that problem and building a solution around it. What was some of that feedback you got when you were doing that as an exercise?
Yeah, that's a great point. And honestly, the iterative design and the user-centered design elements of it that we were taught in engineering school, but that you really put into practice in that Stanford Biodesign type program was extremely advantageous. The feedback that we were getting, we focused mostly on the problem. So we were asking, what's a day in the life of someone with limb loss or limb difference like? What kinds of activities do you do? How do you interact with your prosthetic or your prosthesis? We were asking prosthetists, what are the top challenges you face at your clinic? What's your favorite part about working in prosthetics? All of these are great questions, and it painted a picture for us of what the current technology and the current problems kind of are. Some of the feedback that we've gotten is that people really like that it's passive and that it's mechanical. Electronics can fail and they're not as durable and can't exactly take them swimming. So something that is not electrical, people really like. That's been one of the top pieces of feedback, I would say. And then obviously automatic adjustment has been a huge bonus.
And then what's the approach about taking something like this to market? Are you focusing on a particular sector or patient type?
We aren't, but there is a majority, like the majority of folks with leg amputations or with limb difference also have diabetes and are part of the aging population. So you get a bit of a patient demographic that is kind of the average. And so we're marketing and using a go-to-market strategy fit towards those individuals.
And so where are you now in that journey? Because again, you've been doing a lot of stuff in the last couple of years. For anyone who hasn't been following Sydney, I highly recommend just tracking all the journey because you really are out there making lots of things happen. You've been in a bunch of programs, you've been winning awards and recognition. And so, yeah, where are you just now?
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Certainly trying to get the name out there as best we can. We are right on the exciting cusp between benchtop testing and user feedback. So we've had the first amputee try the socket on, Stevie Crawford out of Denver, Colorado. He's a US Navy vet and is training for the 2026 Paralympics, actually. So very, very cool individual to know. And he gave some awesome feedback. We're very grateful to our advisor, Trace Wright, who set all that up. We are learning from everything that we've done with Stevie. And now we're moving towards testing with more individuals who could provide more feedback, and then ultimately hoping to sell the device early next year in market.
And what does that market look like from a numbers standpoint? How many folks out there have prosthetic legs? And, how many of them also are challenged by, situations where they're experiencing a lot of pain and discomfort?
100%. So the global market represents around $8 billion. And that's just based on the number of people who have access to prosthetic care, which is not the majority when you look globally. If we focus just on the United States, there is almost 6 million people who are living with some level of limb loss or limb difference. And if we zero in just on the folks with leg amputations or limb loss of the leg, that's when you're looking at 350,000 people every year that would be interested in using a product like isoform, whether it's as a replacement socket or as a brand new socket. So it's certainly a massive and really growing problem, because with diabetes being the leading cause, we know diabetes is not exactly getting better or a smaller problem. So it's certainly growing that way. And then also with all the global conflict that's happening around the world.
Just I was just thinking, how do they address pain today and discomfort today with current products?
So back to that sock analogy, that is the gold standard. So what the amputee is taught to do is take their leg off and add a sock if they feel a level of discomfort. But you can imagine how difficult this is. So you're wearing your prosthesis, your limb, which is inside of the prosthetic socket, if it
Mm.
shrinks, it's able to wiggle around, but it's also able to sink down. So you're feeling an increased pressure on the bottom of your residual leg. But an increased pressure means you need to add a sock so that you don't sink down as much, which is very counterintuitive. So it's hard for people who are already relearning how to walk to also then relearn how to manage their limb volume change. And so that's
Mm.
one of the big problems that we're seeing, is just that education is very challenging.
Wow, it's incredible to hear kind of how they address it today with a sock, and the fact that, it's not it's not really a real solid solution. It's like that band-aid fix where it's like, hey, take it off, put it on, and that's frustrating, so I can
Well,
imagine. Yeah, go ahead.
it's I'm passionate about it, so I tend to jump
Yeah,
in. But it's just so challenging, and I think it's, to give credit to the prosthetists, it's such a hard problem to solve because the leg is so dynamic, it's constantly changing. So you can be the best prosthetist in the world and fit the best socket, and then the leg changes. And so it's just hard with everyone having a totally different anatomy and totally different lifestyles, things like that.
totally. And at the end of the day, these clinicians, they want to be able to give their patients the best form of care, right? So it's cool to hear the differences and the real opportunity for improvement here with your technology, because, I would imagine that, if I was a clinician and someone needs a prosthetic, one of my patients needs a prosthetic leg, I'm going to look out for their best interest and try to give them something that gives them a great quality of life and feels as comfortable as possible. And it sounds like you've really done a great job at, coming up with a solution that does exactly that. So really
Thank
impressive.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what does it look like so on that regulatory pathway? Because I think again, we would love to see something like this get to market quickly, but we know in medical device it's never quite as simple as that. So again, what does that journey look like for you?
Yeah, luckily we're an FDA class one medical device. So it is a bit of a quicker path to market. Regulatory requirements are lower, just because there aren't any electronics. It's not coming into contact with the skin. It's a very low risk device. So that really helps us get to market quickly.
Nice. And then when you go to market, is this something there's already standard reimbursement codes that you can be tapping into?
Yeah, what's really exciting, so we had a whole go-to-market strategy around the reimbursement codes that already exist. We know how challenging it is to get a new code, especially in prosthetics. Those do not come out frequently. And so one of the companies in the prosthetic space, Click Medical, has been lobbying for a new code for a long time for their amazing new technology for an adjustable socket, and that was approved April 1st of this year. So we are very grateful to them for all the hard work they put into that, and that will be a code that can apply to Vessl.
Ah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing in
Yeah.
this as well. I think in this community where you get to know other incredible founders who are doing, similar aspects or similar missions in terms of the technology they're applying to a closely aligned problem. So yeah, I can totally understand the value that when they've done all the hard work, but you ultimately everyone benefits in terms of the patients and obviously use the technology providers. And so, turning the corner now in terms of challenges, I can imagine when you're engineering something like this, and you spoke a little bit about iterations earlier on, you've probably been through a bunch of iterations. What have some of those engineering and product development challenges been like for you?
I would say one of the biggest challenges is just that the socket does still need to be custom fabricated. So although we can iteratively prototype the isoform unit really quickly, the socket still needs to be custom made if anyone's going to try it on. So that's been one of the limiting factors for us in getting people to try it on quickly and with large numbers. What we did to kind of overcome that was we created our own, what we're calling a demonstration leg, and we can actually expand and contract that leg ourselves. And so we put that inside of the prosthesis, put it into a motion simulator, and then simulate walking motion. And that allowed us to iteratively prototype without having to have someone try it on when it was big and clunky and horrible. And now that it is small and sleek and almost ready for market, now it's at a much better place where we can have people trying it on.
And
That's
then in terms of
fascinating.
like that's so I just want to follow up on that, but like in
Yeah.
terms of something around that custom fit, how is that scanning done today? And is that something that can then be 3D printed, or how is the actual mold created?
For sure. So there's a few different ways. The gold standard and what is still probably most popular and historically done is kind of the cast method. So they will put plaster, make a plaster cast of the leg and a plaster mold, like positive mold of that cast. And then they're forming sheets of either plastic or carbon fiber onto that to make it custom to the patient. Alternatively, now they're coming out with 3D scanning and 3D printing methods, which are gaining popularity for sure. And because all of that is done for the socket itself, isoform can be added to the bottom of any socket. So we would be compatible with either fabrication method.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, Richard, that was my follow-up question for Sydney, because I think about, how you manufacture and scale something in volume. And when you're talking about, custom solutions, what's the ideal way, Sydney? What do you see that, being from a manufacturing and scaling standpoint? And do you still 3D print? Is that technology evolving enough to support it? Because, you're not really cutting steel tools for one-off molds, right? We all know that.
Right.
So I'm just super curious.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's the benefit of isoform, is that it can be mass manufactured. So the kind of silver disc that you can see in the video, that is what we're able to mass manufacture. So it's standard. You can get small, medium, large based on the size of the patient, but you don't have to make that custom. So you're still making the socket custom. This is typically done in-house anyways. So imagine going to like a physiotherapy office and in the back room, they also make sockets. It's kind of similar to that. And so if in the back room they're using traditional lamination, or if in the back room they're using 3D printing, doesn't really matter for our purposes. We're just mass manufacturing the unit itself and supplying.
And then for someone who's using this, is the idea be that they would just have this one fit and that's them done, or would you expect them to have a change in future, or how would that work out?
So the socket, the whole leg really, is on average changed every 2.3 years. That's from wear and tear. For example, I met someone who he builds scaffolding for a living. So he's constantly kneeling down on hard metals and eroding his socket. So you just end up having to get it replaced. So we would keep that standard. You're still going to be replacing it. It'll be designed to last, every 3 years. And so you'll be replacing it that frequently, especially because you're loading it with every single step all day, every day, right? So it's just going through a lot of wear. So it will be the same replacement time as it currently is.
Nice. What about future milestones here, right? Because everything that you've described, it sounds like everything's set up to move pretty quickly, I think, from like a regulatory standpoint, as well as a reimbursement standpoint. And here you are working, with the gentleman who's a veteran that you mentioned, and you're equipping him with a prosthetic leg. I guess, what are you expecting, and what can we expect to see from Vessl over the next, say, 6 to 18 months?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we spoke about kind of before we started recording, it was just the long weekend, the Labor Day long weekend, and I was soaking up family time because I know how busy this fall is going to be. So we've got quite a few things that we're trying to do. Ultimately, we're trying to go to market. So within the next few months, we will be launching the product and selling commercially, which is extremely exciting, which involves, as you were saying before, like registering with the FDA and passing a few other, there's an ISO standard we want to be testing to for making sure that it is durable enough to last the full 3 years, things like that. And then the beta testing and getting some feedback. So that's all, by the end of 2024. And then early 2025 is really launching sales and getting all of that going. And as we kind of lean into 2025, that's when we start scaling the sales, publishing some papers, whether that's both internal. We also have some academic partnerships that we're setting up, so publishing papers with those groups as well. And as we look further into several years down the line, that's when we'll be expanding internationally to places like Europe, and selling into Canada, our home base, things like that.
That's neat. And you mentioned some partners, and as you were talking about your technology and now kind of hearing more about the market that you're serving, I think of other complementary types of technologies and companies out there. One in particular is a company called Rewalk Robotics, right? Are there opportunities, and you might not know who they are, they're a smaller company and they've got a robotic kind of brace technology that helps, folks in that rehabilitation stage, get back to walking again. Really cool technologies. Do you see an opportunity potentially where there could be cross collaboration between other complementing technologies there? And is that a focus for you?
Oh, absolutely. What's exciting, I kept mentioning that there's no sensors, there's no batteries, there's no motors, but
Yeah.
it is an area that we can move into. We know how popular data is right now. So there's lots of amazing, innovative companies that are coming up with new sensors or apps to track the health of the limb, things like that. So there's some partnerships almost on the digital side that I see.
Cool.
And then the rehabilitation, disability tech, innovation space is a tight knit group. And so there are quite a few of us that know each other and try and support each other as best we can. And there's certainly partnerships that could come out of a lot of that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And again, you mentioned before you have a co-founder, and we do like to shine a little bit of light on, who's helping you behind the scenes and making all this possible. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how you're sort of dividing and conquering, and how's everyone contributing towards everything you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Alexi and I, one of my favorite things to talk about is my team, because I have the best team ever. And maybe every founder says that, but I certainly think that I do. Alexi and I met during this fellowship program. So what was beautiful about that is that we had 10 and a half months to work together, where we knew we liked working together and we liked each other as friends. And then that sets yourselves up for a very solid co-founder foundation, which I don't think everyone has the advantage of doing that. And I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. My role as CEO is a lot of investor relations, networking, outreach, marketing, and I love all of that. I am extremely passionate about what we're doing. So is Alexi. But I just love the kind of outward facing and engaging with people as much as possible. And Alexi, I joke, has more of an engineering brain than I do. He's so good at the creative side, the building the product side, the hands down, head down, hands on, figure out the problem side of things. And it's extremely fun working together. So he's on the back end. We also have a full-time engineer. Shout out to Ed, who is a fantastic support as well. And then a whole slew of advisors that really guide us in the right direction.
Cal, what's really neat is listening to Sydney, you would think that she has just been doing this for like, I don't know, 30 plus years, because I think as much as you have the talent and the innovation, you just clearly got a mindset, which is like just a natural thing about entrepreneurship and the way you're approaching this and how you're thinking about things. It's a really nice trait to have. And yeah, I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way in this journey as well.
Oh yeah. I like to say you learn 14 new things a day. And I think that was really what, I started the fellowship program because I was interested in entrepreneurship. I got a month in and I was like, nah, I don't think this is for me. And then I got, 6 months past that when we had actually learned about the problem and we got so passionate about working in the prosthetic space. And I really liked working with Alexi. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to start the company with him, then yeah. And one of the things that I loved so much about it was learning new things every day. And so that's what keeps me going. There's certainly never a dull moment in entrepreneurship.
Sydney, it's so cool because Richard, you are totally spot on. Sydney, when I listen to you talk, you are so well put together. You're organized. You're on it. You really have the vision, and it's incredible to see. And I think what's really impressive too is when we were talking before we started recording, I thought it was neat to hear how when you first met Richard, you were only 3 months into, building Vessl Prosthetics. And the cool part is that was a little over 2 years ago. So that's pretty miraculous to have accomplished what you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. A lot of, med tech entrepreneurs, right, and inventors, they might be a little jealous at that progress. But what would be maybe, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 tips or pieces of advice that you might be able to share with the audience, what it's like being a founder and what you would recommend to other founders out there that are trying to, pursue, this journey of developing something brand new, innovative, and bring, it to market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny because all of the advice that I give is like the most cliche advice that you hear over and over and over, but it's cliche because it's true, which is another phrase you hear all the time. But the network is by far the biggest piece of advice I could ever give anyone is just build your network. Like people want to help, which is one of my favorite things about the entrepreneurship space is everybody wants to help you. So you can meet people at any networking event or through mutual connections, but growing the network, you never know who's going to know someone who's going to know someone, and that can really help move you forward. So grow the network. My other piece of advice is you're not alone, and you will still feel alone, even though I've told you you're not alone, because I still feel alone, even though I know I'm not alone. But it's funny. It's like in anything in life, really. But whatever you think you're going through that is totally unique to you that no one has ever possibly experienced, then how could anyone ever understand? Someone's probably done it. And so if you just reach out to another founder or an advisor or a mentor or anybody, if they don't know your experience, they probably know someone who does. And so again, comes back to the network, they can connect you. And it just feels really good to know that you're not the only one who's really stressed or had something fall through or whatever it might be. Which comes back to the network. Lean on people. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Love that.
Oh yeah, and I think when Kyle, we connect with our listeners, and we do hear the same things. The people we have on the show, the listeners, and they have the same messages. And so I think as much as it's tried and cliched, it's just so true. And so that totally makes sense. And I think it's a great advice for everyone to remember that the fact is we are a really amazing ecosystem. Fully blessed to be part of this. And again, really to remember those people are there to help, and they do help. To your point, Sydney. So yeah, again, I think we're just super fortunate to be part of this. Looking ahead, as we just close out this conversation here, I would love to know, like, what are you thinking in 3-5 years time? Where would you love to see Vessl Prosthetics?
Yeah, I see Vessl as the new gold standard for socket technology. I would love to see every new amputee who's replacing their socket to be using the Vessl device, the isoform. And I just think that it can empower so many amputees and so many prosthetists. We've got a lot of other ideas in the pipeline for new technologies. So yeah, I really hope that we'll be one of the cornerstones in the prosthetics market.
Well, I'm pretty confident on everything I've heard today that you're going to make this happen. So yeah, we're excited to see what you do in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation.
Yeah, and Sydney, before we let you go, our hope, right, is that we can help spread the news about Vessl and get you out there. And if there's folks that want to get in touch with you as you build out your team and grow, right, maybe looking for investment, who knows what it could be, how would folks get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I'm very responsive on most platforms, all platforms. So LinkedIn, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. My phone number, my email, all of that can pretty easily be found, to be quite frank. But my email is sydney@vesslpro.com, and our website is vesslpro.com. So feel free to find us. We have a little outreach that you can fill out, form that you can fill out on the website if you've got any specific asks, or just reach out to me directly.
Amazing. Well, we can't thank you enough, Sydney, for coming on and just giving everyone an update on where you are with the Vessl journey. And again, super excited to watch you progress over the next couple of years and see all the impact I'm sure you're going to create.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you both again, Richard and Kyle, for having me. It was a fantastic conversation, and I love the word you're trying to spread about companies like mine.
Our pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Sydney Robinson, co-founder and CEO of Vessl Prosthetics. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.